And let me tell you, blended families have some lessons that nobody expects. And really, that's one of the biggest fundamental challenges is I came in thinking it would be this, and we discovered it's requiring that of me, of you, of us, of kids, of parents, of step-parents, of co-parents. And I didn't know I was going to have to do that. So here's the question. Like, when you're presented with that opportunity, are you willing to learn, to grow into who you have to be? And if you are, man, I'm telling you, blended families can be amazing, dynamic, wonderful, redeeming for children and for adults. But you got to put in the work. You got to be willing to grow. And if you are, then you can get there.
What's up, real ones? Welcome back to the Relationship Podcast, where we're bringing the real back to relationships.
Yes, sir.
I'm Asha Steele.
I'm Devin Steele.
And we're so excited that you guys are tuning in today with us.
Yeah, because we got another great episode for y'all today. It's no secret that the blended family dynamic has been the greatest challenge in our marriage, as we've discussed on multiple episodes. But as we've also told y'all before, is we believe that the key to a successful marriage is the successful application of knowledge. So we went on this journey to really discover what are the keys to successful blended families. And while we were on that journey, we came across this book called The Smart Stepfamily Marriage. And from the moment we opened up the book, we felt like it had an inside look to our marriage. Like the author was a fly on the wall in our home, just watching us. Not only did we feel understood after reading this book, but we felt empowered to conquer this challenge that we've been struggling with for a majority of our marriage. So today, we had the distinct honor and privilege to speak to the author, Ron Dill, to help other blended families make the same shift that we did.
So without further ado, welcome Ron to the Relationship Podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be with you. This is really exciting.
Yep.
Thank you. So before we get started, we just wanted to ask the question, what made you dive into the work of working with blended families and step families?
Well, you know, I got started because I was a youth pastor. My first job, fresh out of college, didn't know a thing, but thought I did. And started working with all these teenagers who had some pretty complex family backgrounds. And I figured out real fast, I just didn't know enough, wasn't savvy enough to understand their world and how that was impacting who they were. So I went back to school, got a degree in marriage and family therapy, and I was exposed. My very first clients in my, learning to be a therapist, my very first clients was a step family. And I was so intrigued by what I saw there and got some good training in my graduate program. And I started connecting the dots to all those young people that I had been serving at a different season of my life. And I thought, man, I really think there's something here and I want to do this. Not that I just set out to do it exclusively. I went back into local church ministry, trying to help families and couples of all shapes and sizes. But in the process, fell in love with working with step-family couples, in particular, blended families. And, that was 30 years ago when I started doing that. And hardly anybody in the universe seemed to pay attention to that topic and subject. And so I just found myself walking down that road, trying to figure it out, talking to everybody I could, reading and studying everything I could, talking with research experts and the like, and just found my own path. And here we are today. This is what I do exclusively and have been doing this exclusively now for nearly 20 years.
Yeah. Well, as we said in the introduction, we're grateful for the work that you do because it's helped our marriage out tremendously. Before we get into some of the steps that couples can take to help their blended family, you said something in the book. It was a quote in the book that really stuck out to us that we wanted to touch on before we even start the podcast. In the book, you said, everyone wants a great marriage until building a great marriage requires more of them than they are comfortable giving. What did you mean by that?
Oh, man, Devon, I've been married 37 years, okay? And here's God's little joke on me and you and everybody listening who's ever been in a serious, intimate relationship. God's little joke on us is that we take our vows at the beginning of our wedding, at our marriage, and then life teaches us what we committed ourselves to. We had no idea. We had no idea what was going to be required of us in terms of what love, honor, and cherish looks like, in terms of better and worse. Better for me, worse for my spouse. Worse for me, better for my spouse. Like, life is the thing that teaches us what we got to do to love well. And some people are open to that, and some people are not so much open to that. In other words, they sort of have a calculation of how much they're willing to give. And then when they reach the end of that, that quota, if you will, of how much they're willing to give or serve or what they're learning, what they're willing to learn in order to be a good husband or wife, once they get to the end of that, then they're done. And that's really unfortunate, because the amazing thing is relationships will grow us up. They will help us mature as people and as lovers, as friends. And let me tell you, blended families have some lessons that nobody expects. And really, that's one of the biggest fundamental challenges is I came in thinking it would be this, and we discovered it's requiring that of me, of you, of us, of kids, of parents, of step-parents, of co-parents. And I didn't know I was going to have to do that. So here's the question. Like, when you're presented with that opportunity, are you willing to learn, to grow into who you have to be? And if you are, man, I'm telling you, blended families can be amazing, dynamic, wonderful, redeeming for children and for adults. But you got to put in the work. You got to be willing to grow. And if you are, then you can get there.
Have you found anything in families or in people in general that can increase their capacity to give? Because you may go into a marriage and, you reach a point where it's like, all right, I don't have no more to give. Let me just walk away from this marriage. Is there any way to increase the capacity of your giving?
This is going to sound a little odd, so give me a minute to explain it. But it's understanding your own pain. Now, that sounds strange, and here's what I'm saying. I'm a firm believer that it's pain that limits us. It's pain that somebody taught you in life that you're unlovable. And so when you have a stepchild look you in the eye and say, you're not my mom, I don't have to do what you say, and you just face that rejection day in and day out, that thing inside you that says, yep, see, you're unlovable, that's what makes you unwilling to press through. If there's the pain in your life that says you really can't trust people, boyfriend number one and husband number one and, stepdad number one and your stepdad number two. And so, I'm not so sure you're going to stay around either. And you're just sort of living under the residue of that negative idea that you started somewhere in your life. That pain limits how much you're willing to trust, how much you're willing to sacrifice on behalf of your usness in your relationship. I like to call it usness because it's a contribution from both of us. We both create that together. And if I'm holding back just a little bit because pain has told me and taught me, and I believe the lie, pain tells me I can't trust you, well, then I'm never going to give all of me to our us. And that means you're going to look at me going, gosh, you're holding back. Why should I give? And the next thing you know, you got two people that won't give. And that's a disaster ready to happen. So pain is the thing that limits us. But if we're willing to stare it down and say, yeah, no, I'm going to get a hold on you. I'm going to understand you. I'm not going to let you dictate my life. Well, now all sorts of opportunities open up for us to find space in relationships that we've never experienced before. And that's where you grow.
Yeah, that's so interesting because it touches so much on our situation, which we already discussed. The book does so much. But just from saying that, I personally grew up in a blended family. So going into our marriage of having a blended family, I had this notion that I knew, or I had a leg up in a sense, and I didn't realize all the challenges that I would face from my own dynamic of my upbringing, wanting to do things differently, and my current family of my own. So for you, what are some of the things that you present to families going into the beginning of their marriage of a step family that they can kind of help them navigate those challenges before they reach them?
Well, Asha, let's just start with the one you just so wisely articulated, and that is, I have my own preconceived ideas of what's going to happen and how it's going to happen. And all of us do. Hey, no shame. We all have expectations for life and relationships. That's to be understood. But a lot of people base those on, well, as you did, a previous family, a previous dynamic. Other people base their blended family expectations on what a biological family is. Sometimes we call it a first family. what it is, how it works, what a mom does, what a dad does, your ideas of parenting and how that should flow. And here's the reality. Blended families are families, but they're families of a different shape and color. There's some very backward, upside down, I should say, dynamics that take place in blended families, and that changes how things work. So if you were a successful mom, for example, in your first family, and you've got kids and you carried them through the single parent years, and man, you know what it takes to be a mom. And then you step into a stepmother role. Your expectation is stepmom will be like being a mom. And reality is, wow, is it different? People look at you like you got a third eye, and you feel like, you're trying to do the things you'd normally do with your kids, but your stepchildren just sort of go, yeah, no, I don't think so. Or, you make a move, if you will, as a parent, and your husband jumps in and goes, whoa, 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 those are my kids. What are you doing? Yeah. And you have this conflict, and you're like, where did this come from? I did not see that coming. That's a very common experience for people walking into blended families. And it's just because the rules are different. Things are a little upside down. So fundamentally what I do is I help people understand the blueprints. If you want to build this family, the blended family you're walking into, this is the way you do it. Here's what you should expect. Here's what you should not expect. And again, if you're willing to adjust your expectations and fit with what you're actually creating, then you discover you do a lot better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You also brought up something in the book where you said that dating is not real. Like, some of the expectations that we come with is how easy it may have been during the dating phase in order to get along with your future stepchild. But then after the wedding, there's this shift in the dynamic, which you pretty much touched on a little bit.
Yeah.
Where the success or the relationship between the step parent and the stepchild has a huge impact on the success of the step family. Why do we see that shift where things just get harder once you say I do?
Yeah, dude, here's the reality. When you're dating somebody, everybody's nice. I mean, you're putting forth your best foot. You're trying to win her heart, his heart, the kid's heart, something like everybody's doing a good job. I mean, think about it. Let's just walk it out for a second. So, maybe you're dating this guy with kids and, you want to be sweet and kind to his kids. You want to get along. Why? Because that's a part of winning his heart. And you like the guy. And so liking the kids is a part of the package. And so everybody puts their best foot forward. Now, what's happening on the other side of the equation is he's dating you. And of course, he's doing the same thing. He's hoping you and your kids, or his kids, will get along. And when he asks his kids, what do you think of her? They're like, kids want to make us happy. And so they sometimes tell you a little of what's in their heart, but not necessarily everything in their heart, right? So they'll say, yeah, it's good. She's great. And they do think she's great, but she hasn't tried to tell them to clean up their room yet. All we're doing is getting ice cream and having a good time watching a movie and enjoying each other. And then real life sets in. And I'm going to go as far as to say, if you're cohabiting, that's not real life yet. It's only when everybody knows this is forever. This is till death do us part. That's when legally it gets real. That's when emotionally and psychologically it gets real. And when you were just dating my parent, that was cool. But now you're trying to tell me to pick up my socks. Now I have your kids running in my bedroom and stealing my clothes and then not asking. Now I'm having to go to a new school because we had to change residence. Now there's a lot of things that are different in my life because you are in my life, step parent. And all of a sudden, I feel really weird about this. Let me tell you, here's another side to that. Sometimes kids love or like, I should say, especially in the beginning, they really like and respect this step parent. And that creates a problem for them. And you think, well, why is that a problem? Yeah. Well, see, there's the deal. I like you, stepdad, but now I feel sort of weird with my biological dad. Like I feel guilty, like I don't want him thinking that you're taking his place in my heart. So all of a sudden a kid is trying to weigh out all of those loves and loyalties. And the last thing they want to do is damage their relationship with their biological father. Even if he isn't showing up, even if he's sort of hit and miss in the child's life, they're really desperate for him to be there. And the last thing they want is to replace him with some other. So liking you creates a conflict for them. And so you get this hot and cold thing coming from kids. And it's them trying to work out in their heart, their mind, and their soul how they're going to make room for everybody in their world. Well, that's just difficult. And nobody saw that coming. The kid didn't see it coming. You didn't see it coming. And so all of a sudden, real life shows you, yeah, we have some things to work through. Now, I always quickly remind everybody, when this happens, don't panic. Don't throw in the towel. You didn't do anything wrong. This is just the way it rolls. And so you got to be patient. You're going to slow down, and we could talk a lot about, that step parenting journey if you want to. But the big thing is just recognize it's not a mistake. It just means you got a little work to do, and you can get there.
Yeah, that's so true. So I feel like with Devin and I think a big factor was with introducing our step family that we didn't have the discussion initially. As far as in the book, you talked about parenting styles and the roles that you play. How important is it to have those discussions and what they look like for the family and for the child?
It's huge. It's really huge. Let me put this in context. Kids in blended families have been through a whole lot of loss. And what I mean by that is, a parent died, or there was a divorce, or there was a breakup of the biological parents in the home. And so they had to move homes, they had to change friends, they had to move churches, they had to go to a different school, they had to find a whole new set of friends. And that was just the single parent years. And then there was the economic changes. And then there was the trying to get time with my dad, trying to get time with my mom changes, and navigating all that terrain. And now there's more changes because now there's new step parent in my life, step siblings perhaps, new changes in school and home and church and location, and everything that is wrapped around the new transition into a family also brings some measure of loss, if I could say it that way, for kids. So when somebody says, hey, we're changing the rule about bedtime, for you, it just seems so simple. Like, we're going to move it 30 minutes one way or the other. But to a kid, it is another loss. It is another change. It is another thing that represents how out of control I feel in my life. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not happy about it. I don't know about you, but when people come into my world and start changing things, I'm not happy about it. I'm 57 years old. Kids who are 15 or 20 or 3 are not happy about all the earthquakes, if you will, and the aftershocks and the aftershocks and the after. So any change in rules and parenting sort of is this overflow of change and unwanted transition and loss and sadness, and step parent telling me to pick up my socks. That sort of implies that if I say yes, ma'am, and go to work, that I'm embracing you and I'm accepting everything that's going on in my life, in my home right now. And I may be all for most of it, but there's a little bit of it I just can't quite get on board with. And so say no and be in a pain in the butt right now just seems like the right thing to do. Yeah. And that's the kind of crazy stuff kids are having to navigate when the rules change. Again, for the adults, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but it really is. Now, here's the other piece. Parenting together. My wife and I have an opportunity to travel to Ghana, West Africa on a regular basis. And I was asking a guy there, I was asking about his life, his culture growing up. I said, what did you learn about parenting as a kid? And he said, oh, my dad taught me, one song raises a child. Like, you cannot sing 2 different songs as parents and expect your children to pick up the melody. You got to sing one song together in unison. And that is what teaches your child character and values and direction, and it gives them a sense of what life is, what's expected of them in life. Okay, so if bio parent has got one song they're singing, one sheet of music they're singing, and the other parent, step parent, singing off another, that is confusing. Right. I don't know what's expected of me. I don't know where to go. I don't know how to win as a child, right? That confusion has to be clarified at the parental level. So that's conversation. That's figuring out, well, I think we ought to do this, and you think we ought to do that. We got a lot of conversation to have, because until we get on the same page, we're not leading from a position of unity, and that's just confusing and hard for everybody.
Yeah. You gave a lot of tips in the book about what the step parent can do in order to foster that relationship with the stepchild. But I don't want to start there, because one thing your book made me do was take accountability of the things that I wasn't doing. Right. I may have suggested certain things for Asha to do, like maybe you should try this, maybe you should try that. Asking her to be more committed than I was committed. And it didn't really work. And something you said in the book really hit me in my heart and made me realize that I had a lot of work to do in order to change this dynamic, where you said, without a strong commitment from the bio parent, most children are not motivated to accept the step parent's presence, let alone their authority. How big is it for the person who is bringing the child into the marriage to really step up and set the foundation?
It is huge, because a child's greatest investment in their life is their biological parent or parents. So in your case, Devon, your daughter's investment is in you. Now, she may be fond of and really drawn to her stepmom, but if she's losing connection with you as a result of this new family, then all that other stuff becomes secondary. So if you're engaged and involved and, hey, saying to your daughter, hey, honey, I know she's not your mama, but she's my wife. And when she asks you to pick up your socks, I expect you to do that. That communicates to your daughter an expectation from you. It sets a tone. We call that passing power. You're passing power to your wife so that it elevates her status in the eyes of your daughter. But if you are unengaged, and believe me, I've dealt with a lot of situations where the biological parent basically hired, that was maybe a little slip there, married somebody to raise their kid and basically just sort of said, they're yours, hey, you be the mama, I'm out, I got stuff to do. Like, whoa. No. That child is going to feel abandoned by you as a biological parent. You cannot hand the kid off. Like, you've got to stay engaged and set the step parent up for success by what you communicate to your children. Now, notice, I just want to unpack what I said there, because it's really very critical to say something like to your child, hey, look, I know she's not your mom, but she's my wife and I love her. And she and I, that thing is till death do us part. So you need to get used to it. And if she asks you to, help clean up or do something around the house, I just expect you to obey her just like you would me. Now, what's really critical about that little phrase, and you can say that over and over, and then by your actions support that, what you're saying to your child is, I do not expect you to love, in this case, your stepmother. You're not insisting or demanding on love. And here's why that's important, because a child cannot give genuine love unless it's genuine. Unless it's from their heart, they can't give it. So you can't demand it. But what you can gently insist on is politeness and kindness and decency towards this woman who is your wife. And with that expectation, you set up an environment where it's more likely that she's obedient, your daughter's obedient to her, that they get along, that they have more wins together than losses together. And that creates time for the two of them to figure out how to like each other and then how to love each other. We're just making space for that genuine, authentic heart connect to take place. But it's got to happen on its time. Can't be anything we insist on or demand, especially dad can't demand that. But you can encourage her to be kind and decent towards the stepmother. That empowers your wife to get the kitchen cleaned up.
Yeah, I agree with what you just said. But one of the challenges that I face, and I'm sure a lot of bio parents face when it comes to setting those boundaries and setting the direction of what your household is going to go in or where your household is going to go in, is yes, you should have those conversations, but it's hard trying to have that conversation when your child's well-being is so much on your mind. Like, you don't want to hurt their feelings, because you're going to go to them and have that conversation and they're going to look at you like you're crazy. Like, oh, you're taking my step-parent side. What about me? You're isolating me. Y'all are both against me. It's a tough thing to really deal with. So how does the bio parent have those tough conversations where they're not playing defense, where they're not trying to make the child happy and make their spouse happy, but just trying to do the right thing?
Man, that is such an insightful question. I'm so glad you asked, because a lot of biological parents get frozen when they feel caught That's really what it is. I feel caught between my wife, my spouse, and my child. And in effect, you are, but you're not. Like, it feels like your child's saying, well, if you're not taking my side, then you love her more than you love me. Mm-hmm. And it feels like, well, no. I don't want you feeling that, because I know you've been through a lot, because I know you. And by the way, that little knowledge of how much your child has been through that's been hard can be incredibly paralyzing if you let it. And that's the trick. Parents, you can't be paralyzed by your child's pain. You can connect to their pain. You can acknowledge their pain. You can say, look, I get it. Here's another change. You never had a stepmom before. Now she's telling you she's asking you to, help around the house. That's got to feel weird, honey. I totally get that. So you can connect into that pain. And then you turn the corner and you say, however, to get along around here, we're all going to have to do our part. And I'm asking you to do your part. Now, you and I are still going to have our special little 10-minute book reading time every night before you go to bed. But my wife's important to me, and she's also going to get some of me as well. So I love you, and I love her, and that's the way it's going to be. And so you reassure, you connect into whatever the moment is for the child that feels weird or strange or, is throwing them off. And yeah, you're right. That's hard. That's another change. Sorry about that. I wish you didn't have to go through this one, but you do. And then you turn the corner and you say, but here's how we get back to life. Here's what I expect of you. And you be parental, if I could put it that way. When people get paralyzed by guilt or their child's pain, now you're not parental, you're their friend. And that is not helpful to a child. Guys, I need to explain this. When parents get paralyzed, they think, okay, I'll just give you one extra cookie and I'll just let you stay up a little 30 minutes longer and not make you go to bed because your world has been tough. You are not helping your child resolve their grief. You are not in that moment giving them hope that they can move through their grief, not get past it, not forget about it. Change has been hard, but move through it in a responsible manner. And you're certainly not requiring them to figure out how to bring their best self into the home. You're actually supporting them in being sad, in being, if I could say it, pathetic, and in so doing, being manipulative towards the adults in their world. That's not helping a child deal with life. That's actually keeping them stuck in life. So it's a gentle acknowledgement. I see, this is hard. I get it. I'm sorry. Wish you didn't have to go through this, but you do. I love you. Now, she is your stepmom. She did ask you to do something. I expect you to obey her. So it's a both acknowledgement and then a turn the corner and be parental.
I have so many questions that I can ask for all the viewers.
Bring them. Let's keep going. This is great.
We actually had a discussion on one of our previous podcasts, and we talk about it a lot. And certain dynamics, of course, it depends on how you introduce the step family. But for us, it was a challenge just because all the parents weren't on the same page. And I feel like from our viewers and messages that we get, a lot of times that's the case where the outside parent from within the household that you're living in may not necessarily be on the same parents as parents within the household. They may not get along the way that they should. And so that's really impacting the relationship with even the bio parents and the step parents and the child's relationship. So how do you navigate when all the parents aren't on the same page?
Okay. If there were some specifics you wanted me to address, I can, but let me just take a stab at a common one that a lot of people respond to us about, write to us about. And it's let me just make this up. Let's say there's a biological dad who lives outside the home, and the stepdad and his wife, the child's mom, is inside the home. And the biological dad who lives elsewhere is bad-mouthing the stepdad. He's telling the kids things that are sort of saying, look, I'm your dad. He's not. You don't have to listen to him. Or his parenting style is just really different. And it puts the stepdad in this awkward place of, if you have any expectations at all for the kids in your home, that's very different than what their dad expects of them. And so you're kind of feel like you're competing with what he lets them do versus what you feel like is right to teach them about life. That's a really awkward place. So what's really important there is twofold. Number one, that the biological mom in that case is supporting the stepdad in front of the kids, with the kids. Look, I expect you. He's just like your teacher at school. This is an analogy we use a lot. It's just like your teacher at school. If they ask you to do something, you need to do it. It's just like your coach on a football field. Devon, you ever had a coach on a football field?
A little bit. A couple years
just
of
a
my
little
life.
bit. Yeah. I mean, those people run your life, right?
Yeah.
But are they your dad? No, they're not your dad. And you walk off the field and there are limits to the role they play in your world because they're a coach and coaching has limits. So step-parenting has limits. But in this house, in this space, you get to tell somebody what to do. And the biological mom is the one who communicates that expectation to her kids. Now, here's the other side of that. A blessing is when a stepdad says to, now just imagine this message, communicating to a child, hey, look, I know I'm not your dad. I'm never going to take your dad's place. Your dad is your dad, and he is an awesome guy. And I love and support your relationship with him, and I'm never going to get in the way of that. I just glad you're here, and I look forward to the time that we get together. Okay, the message to the child is, I'm not competing with your dad. You don't have to choose between me or him. You get to have us both. And your dad is a priority, and I know it is. Now that takes a child out of the middle. All of a sudden, they don't feel like they've got to make a statement to you about how important their dad is, and they've got to be, misbehave toward you because that tells you my dad's the most important thing. Like all the games sort of go away at that point because you have blessed their relationship. Now, here's the other side of that. You can also say that to the biological dad. So imagine a stepdad saying this to the biological dad. And you decide, I always tell people, you decide how to communicate this. Could be in writing, could be a text, could be in person, face to face. You decide what's appropriate. But basically the message is, hey, Dad, I want you to know that I know you're the dad and I'm not. I will never, ever, ever speak ill of you in front of your kids. I will never get in the way of your relationship with the kids. I'll do everything I can to support that. If we forget to send the math book, you let me know. I'm going to make it right. I just want you to know I'm not you, and I will never, ever, ever try to replace you. As a matter of fact, I'm just honored to be around your kids. I'm just going to try to be a bonus person in their life and bring some blessings. That's what I'm about. You let me know if you have any questions. Thanks for your time. Have a nice day. The no threat message, as we call it, is to say, in effect, I'm not a threat to you in your relationship with your children. I'm a bonus, not a replacement. Now, when everybody understands that, and the bio parent knows that the step parent understands that, when the children know that the step parent understands that, you just became more respectable, more decent, more honorable, more likable, because there's no competition. That kind of ambassador relationships development goes a long way towards setting a tone between the two households that we are not enemies, we are not in competition, we're on the same side. Let me give you a quick analogy. Here's what you're going for. You want to be the U.S. and Canada. I was in Canada last month. They're lovely people. Been there many times. I love flying in and out. Great folks. You can land. But they have a totally different system of money and government, and social norms are a little different. But hey, you get on a plane, you come back to the U.S. and everybody goes, "Hey, how was Canada? It was great." Nobody says, "Why did you go to Canada? That's terrible. I can't believe you went to." Because why? We get along so well. It's easy to cross the border. Now, what you don't want to be is Russia and Ukraine. If you're one of those two situations, and that's the way you deal with the other country, how do you think it's going to be for children to get to cross the border, to go over there, and everybody's going to be mad at them because they were with you. And then when they come back to you, they're going to feel like, oh no, am I betraying this country because I'm going into the... When there's that sort of hostility between countries, nobody's safe, nobody's at peace, and in particular children. And they end up taking the brunt of it. And so when you as an adult can ambassador a good relationship across households, and it doesn't mean they're all automatically nice, right?
That's what I was just about to ask you, because it takes, what you're speaking about, it takes a lot of emotional maturity amongst all the parties involved. So even if the step parent is going to the other bio parent. They're like, hey, I don't want to take your place. I'm honored to be around your child. And they're like, get out of here. I don't want you around my child. Go have your own kids. Leave my kids alone. Is it possible to still build a smart step family marriage when the other parent is just like, I'm set out to destroy your marriage because now y'all are having the lifestyle or the household that I always wanted with you, and it's not possible anymore?
It's true. You can't make a tyrant stop being a tyrant.
Right.
That is true. But what you can do is manage yourself in such a way that you make it a little more difficult for them to be a tyrant. Now, I'm not saying this fixes them. It doesn't. And the answer to your question is, yes, you can still be a smart step family, but you're going to have a pain in your side the whole time if the other household is just constantly throwing negativity into the mix. That is a reality. That is one of those stressors that is difficult and challenging. And it really means husband and wife in your home, you got to do a lot of talking. You got to do a lot of processing. You got to figure out what you're going to do next in light of what the other home is throwing at you now. I do know you can't repay evil with evil. There's a biblical principle that I think it just holds so much wisdom.
Yeah.
And that is, trying to repay evil with good is how you set a tone to say, we're not stooping to that level. We're not going to make it worse, because you just pay evil with evil, fight fire with fire. You just got more fire. You got a bigger wildfire. That's all you got. So you got to do something that is decent and kind. And by the way, I should just add, I even as I say this, I know there's limits. I'm not talking about you don't endure the abuse of a child by being kind. No, you're going to call the authorities on that one. Like, there's certain things that you do take strong action around. I'm not talking about those extremes. I'm just talking about the sort of the daily grind of they're not kind on the other side, and it's difficult and challenging, and life would be so much easier for you, and really most importantly for the kids, if there wasn't a tyrant, like Putin in Russia going, nope, we're going to attack you no matter what. Yeah. I mean, that's just difficult. It's really, really hard. And so you buckle down and you try to do what you can, and you manage the best you can within your home.
Mm-hmm. So when Devin and I got married, we had a discussion with my stepdaughter Leah, because she asked, well, what am I supposed to call you now, right? And she asked if she could call me mom, which kind of caused a little confusion for everyone, especially her mom per se, because
the biological
it was
mom,
probably,
yes.
Feeling the uncomfortable feeling of, well, that's my role. That's what I am.
Yes, right.
And so how do you go about that conversation with the child? If you do have a great relationship, if they are, because at the time she was 4. Yeah. So it was confusing for her. And so if you do have a great relationship, how do you navigate that conversation of how do I introduce myself now? What role do I play? And talking to not only the other parent, but the child as well.
Yeah, great question. So when people ask me, what's the appropriate term? I say, I have no earthly idea. What you have to do is have a dialogue within your family and come up with the right answer. I call this co-creating the right answer. Mm-hmm. So you had a conversation with her. That's exactly what you need to do, because you hear her, she hears you, you guys come to some understanding. Will this work for you? This works for me. And now we know how to take the first step in our family journey. I tell people all the time, this is just like having a mother-in-law and a father-in-law. Anybody who's ever been married knows you get one of those when you get married. Yeah. And you may have brother-in-laws. Well, what do you call them? Right. When you introduce them, do you call them, this is my mom? Well, some people do, but a lot of people don't. And it's based on the level of connection and relationship. Now, some people, when they first got married, didn't say, this is my mom. But after a few years and developing a relationship, then they start gravitating toward more affectionate terms of endearment. Hey, that's exactly what happens in blended families. On day one, step parents, you might be by first name. They just might call you Aisha, and that's it. And that's what you got. Or sometimes it's more formal than that. It depends on what part of the country you're in. All kinds of little cultural isms that affect that sort of thing. But the point is, when you agree to, yeah, that works for me, let's go with this. How do you want me to introduce you, stepchild? How do you feel about me calling you, this is my daughter? By the way, most adults don't even consider that one. They're just thinking about what they call the child calls a step parent. But you want to also have a conversation with the child and let them tell you, what they are comfortable with in terms of how you introduce them. And here's why. Just imagine you're at a school function and you're talking to a friend and you say, yeah, this is my daughter. And you're introducing your stepdaughter, but you say, my daughter. Well, the biological mom is 2 feet away, heard you say that, and she's now offended. By the way, her level of threat goes up. And that's why we call it the no threat message a little while ago. You're trying to say, I'm not a threat to you. When threat is high, there will be hostility between the two countries. When threat is lower, there will be less hostility between the two. So the terminology matters because it speaks to respect between countries and for people. Now, in your case, you had a child who was pretty young, and it's really common for kids under the age of 5 to sort of just jump into a step-parent's lap and be more comfortable with you than you are with them sometimes. and so she wants to call you mom. And so you're like, yeah, but that's dangerous. Honey, I'm not so sure. So, it could be that what you have a conversation is around respect for mom. That's a special term. That's really cool. I love that you want to call me that. Tell you what, when we're at home, you can call me that. But when we're out and about or talking with other people, how about we come up with another term that we'll use when we're in that setting? And so it is a conversation to show respect to all parties, to recognize that there's something affectionate here from the child and you don't want to deny them that. That's the one thing you don't want to do. But at the very same time, sort of create a climate where we can have a third name that she uses when she's with mom or around mom, or mom happens to be around the two of you, that is also respectful for her. This is not easy space. It's an ongoing dialogue. And again, it starts in one place, and as time and as relationship grows, terms will evolve.
Earlier, you talked about the importance of the bio parent passing authority on to the step parent. I want to touch on that for a little bit, because in the book you discuss how there's 2 types of authority. There's positional authority and there's relational authority. And step parents come into a marriage with that positional authority, basically meaning that because of their position as a step parent, they're given authority. But the type of authority that step parents should aim for is that relational authority with the stepchild, where that child now trusts that parent. There's that mutual trust between them. How important is it to work to build up that relational authority, and how do you do it?
Yeah. So when you accept that you come in like a positional authority, that's the good start. The mistake is when a step parent walks in and says, new sheriff in town, my way or the highway. That is insisting on a relational authority with equity that you haven't built. You don't have. It's saying I'm writing a check on money that's not in this bank, but I'm insisting that everybody cash it and act like I have got that much money in the bank. It's going to be a sabotage of yourself and of the relationship. So positional authority is what coaches have, like we said earlier, what teachers have on the first day of school. All of our kids go to school on a regular basis and respect other adults. Right. They know how to do this. And when a step parent walks into their life and says, yeah, I'm one of those, then it sort of gets easy. Okay, I get it. I don't have to love you. But when you ask me to put my dishes in the dishwasher, I got to do it, because that's sort of what positional authority adults get to do. Now, I'm not necessarily happy about it, just like I'm not happy about the teacher giving me a pop quiz, but it's what I have to do. It's only when we get it backwards that things go haywire. What's going to happen in the meantime, while you start with positional authority, is, you want to build relationship, because ultimately that's really what this is about. You asked, how do people do that? Same way you make a friend. If you're going to make a new friend, let's say you got a new coworker that's just in the office, the last thing you're going to do is walk up to that coworker, say, hi, my name's Ron, and then give him a big sloppy kiss and a hug. That's not getting you a new friend. That's getting you a new enemy. You might get thrown in jail. Right. That's offensive, right? So step parents sometimes are so eager, they work too hard to make it happen. No, how do you make a friend? Well, you start a conversation. You get to know them. You find something they like that you like, and you spend a little time doing that thing. We call that middle ground. It's the thing that sort of naturally brings you together in a way where you can be around each other, but not necessarily having a deep, intimate sort of, caring family type relationship. Like that's going to come at the end of the journey, not at the beginning. And so you build a friendship with things you have in common. And in the process of playing video games with a kid or playing, dolls or whatever it is that they like, you discover there's something else that you guys both like. Yeah. And you spent a little time doing that. And the other factor is time. Lots and lots of time. One of the things we know about healthy step families is they take about 5 to 7 years to really find their sense of family identity between most of the family members. Not everybody necessarily, but most of the time there's sort of an identity that's created at that point. And that's a hard reality for some people to hear. What, you mean it's going to take me a couple of years for this kid to really start warming up to me? Maybe. It might. They might. Depends on their age, what's going on in their world and their life when you show up, and how motivated they are to actually sort of build a relationship with you. There's a lot of factors that you don't get to control. So you got to be patient and you got to just be persistent and keep trying to build a friendship. It will evolve into something. And as it evolves, you just go the next step and the next step and the next step. It's kind of like the relationship with your mother-in-law. Yeah. You didn't exactly choose each other. Right. Somebody else made a choice for one another. You chose somebody else. And then you get a mother-in-law. Well, how do I get along with my mother-in-law? Well, you find some things you have in common. You start spending time together. You let the relationship evolve into what it can be.
Yeah.
That's very interesting that you said that, because with the 5 to 7 years, because a lot of people will look at it like that's such a long time. It's so daunting. Right. And with us personally experiencing a lot that we've gone through with, seeking counseling and guidance over this extended period of time, a lot of times as a step parent, you start to feel exhausted with trying to, make these bids for a connection, and you just don't feel like you're receiving them. You feel rejected. You feel like that flame is somewhat dying out. How do you maintain that momentum or that energy, that persistence to say, I'm going to continue to work on this when you feel like you're not really getting anything in return?
Oh, it's so hard. And I'm glad you said that, because I know somebody out there watching or listening is going, I'm done. I don't know what else to do.
Yeah.
So a few words I would just say is sometimes your heart leads, more than reality will allow it. So you're eager for more relationship and it just doesn't seem to be developing. I don't want you to give up that eagerness, but I do want you to dial it back a little bit. Just turn down the volume a little bit on that eagerness so that you're not constantly disappointed, but you're still there looking for opportunities to find a nice moment and connect with the child, because that's how you deepen that friendship into something that becomes more like family than just friends. And so it's slow and tedious. Another factor here is the biological parent. I want to say something to bio parents listening right now.
I'm listening.
Thank you. Your spouse needs a big hug and a kiss from you every now and then. Take them in your arms and just say to them, look, I see how hard you're trying. I see your effort. I want you to know I appreciate it. You are my queen. Thank you for loving on my child, even though you're only getting a little bit back. I know it's hard. I just thank you. I want you to know I see that. I mean, things like that go a really long way to kind of filling the tank again for the step parent who's in that battle day in and day out. Somebody needs to acknowledge their effort. And if the child's not, the bio parent can help fill that gap. Another suggestion I have is find other step parents like you. I mean, we're big advocates of what we do at Family Life Blended. We help people form groups and talk and get stepmoms going out for lunch on a regular basis and talk, and just sort of sharing that load with other people who can say, yep, honey, I get it. Me too. And that helps. It helps you kind of stay the course a little bit, moment after moment with time. Here's the last thing I'm going to say, and this is perspective. And this may help a little bit today, but someday you're going to wake up and you're going to realize this has actually been taking place and you did not even realize it. There's a whole body of literature out there, research on stepfamilies that have done really well. And what they did in this research is fascinating. We report on this in our book, Building Love Together in Blended Families, that I wrote with Dr. Gary Chapman, whom I know you have interviewed before. So here's what we found. They interviewed kids who grew up in a stepfamily, and they're now young adults. So they have a little life perspective. They're not kids, they're adults looking back on their journey with their step-parent. And they asked them a whole series of questions that basically was getting at, how did things get better between you and your step-parent? And what they found is that often when step-parents were feeling like, I'm getting nowhere, in fact, they were getting somewhere. That the child was moving their heart toward the step-parent, that they were feeling more trusting of the step-parent, that they were feeling, wow, you just showed up for me in a big way, and I want to say thank you, but I just don't know how to do that yet. And so they didn't. And so the whole time things were getting better, but the step-parent didn't realize that because the heart was shifting in the child, but it wasn't showing up on the outside yet. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense.
So one of the things I want to say to step-parents is stay in there. Keep trusting that it's going somewhere. You're actually making progress even when you don't necessarily feel it. I interviewed a guy for that book that we wrote, and he said, as a matter of fact, we were in the middle of the interview when he realized something. I was asking him, how do you know if your stepson appreciates you? And he said, I don't know. His love language is words of affirmation, and he never says anything nice to me ever. I mean, I've just never heard him say anything nice to me at all. And then he stopped and he said, wait a minute. But I have heard him tell his friends that I've done nice things for him. I have heard him brag on me a couple of times to his buddies. He's a teenager, saying that I helped him fix his car. And I'm like, dude, that's it. He can't quite say it to you yet, but he can say it about you to other friends. It's happening. You're getting somewhere. It's just not quite directed to you yet. And that's often what kids are going through. They just can't figure out how to enter that new space with their step-parent, but their heart is actually moving toward them. So hold on to that. Trust that you're actually getting somewhere, and someday you'll wake up and go, I think we're there.
Yeah. I want to talk to you about a topic that one of our real ones sent. Our real ones are the people who listen to this podcast. And I think that a lot of families deal with this. It's one thing when your family is made up of the two parents and the stepchild. It's another thing when you start to introduce more children into the family, because then there's this level of comparison. We're watching to see how that parent is treating their child from a previous relationship versus the children who come from the current relationship. How do you navigate that type of situation where you're so focused on if all the children are being treated equally? Because what our real one said is the dad is hard on our children together, but he's more lenient on his previous child. And it pisses her off that they don't get the same treatment amongst all the children.
Yeah, that feels like an injustice. It really does. And it is in a way. I mean, especially if there's a huge leniency towards the one biological child, but not towards the ours children, as we sometimes call them. Let's just pull back for a second and acknowledge that there are different dynamics at play. Like, for example, anybody who's a biological parent who then marries somebody and becomes a step-parent to their children, you understand that you can tell your kids to do stuff and you can take a posture with them that you can't quite take yet with your stepchildren. Like, it is two different things. And that can feel like you're being unfair. It's not uncommon for biological children to come to that parent and complain. Well, you make us clean up after ourselves, but you never make them do any of that. How come? Yeah. That's when you say to your kids, look, I get it. You've seen that, and you're right. That's true. But I'm your dad, and I'm not their dad. And so I'm still figuring that out. I'm working with their mom. We're getting stuff done. She's the one who sometimes gets them to do things that I don't do necessarily, but I am asking you to do it. And that's what I expect of you. So let's get on with it. And so you acknowledge, recognize, say to your kid, I see you. This is hard. And now here's what I expect. Here's where we're going to follow through. When a parent in that situation is really being super soft, I want to chase the fear. So I would say to that step parent who wrote in that question, I think they probably wrote it, saying, okay, it's not fair to me that he's that one way with our children, but he's another way with his child. Like, I want to know why he is that way. What's the fear? Is his concern that if he holds his kid to a standard, that the mama in the other household's gonna, have a custody war, or gonna say things, or like, does he feel like his relationship with that child is fragile, and so he's afraid of asking them to do the same things that he asked the other children? Like, what is it that's keeping him stuck? Now, if it's just feeling sorry for the child, you know what? We as parents, we got to get past that one, because we're not helping our kid grow up and develop. If we allow them to stay stuck in their pain, they're just learning that this is a big, heavy weapon I can use against people to do what I want to do. We're teaching selfishness with that. Yeah. You're not helping your child. So you got to get over that. But sometimes there's a legitimate pain or fear that's kind of locking a parent down and keeping them from following through with behavior. And until you and he, in this case, understand what that is, you can't really address it. You can't get around it. You can't change it. So chase that, see if there's something there, and then decide what to do about that thing so you can start treating the children with equity.
I want to stay on that topic of discipline in the way that you treat the child. You said in your book that step parents are not always granted the same benefit of the doubt as bio parents when it comes to disciplining or handling the bio child, the stepchild. How important it is for the bio parent to give their spouse the benefit of the doubt when they're dealing with the child?
Well, yeah, you always want to hear the story. I mean, I tell people, look, parents in biological families disagree about discipline all the time. You want to ground our 5-year-old, for 2 weeks? What? He's 5. I don't think it needs to be that long. You can have those kind of conversations. You can disagree, and you can try to come to some, reasonable shared expectation, one voice to follow through with that child. And by the way, I always want to say to people, if you're really unsure what good parenting looks like, read some good books. I mean, there's a lot of good things out there. But make sure you, thank you, but make sure you read step family books, because they're going to also add that whole layer about the whole step parenting dynamic that most parenting books are not going to give you. So it's helpful to read the right books, but read some stuff and learn what good parenting looks like so that you can then find your one voice and parent together. For the biological parent to give the benefit of the doubt to the step parent is to say, I trust your heart for my children. Hey, let me tell you something. I've been doing this a long time. I've worked with clinical families that are having high distress and a lot of trouble. And I've worked with people who are just getting married and they're high on love and energy and they're ready to go. And 99.9% of the step parents I've ever dealt with are amazing people. They're sacrificial, they're giving, they really have wonderful intentions towards their new stepchildren. And sometimes that's what gets them into trouble, because they're really trying to help. But, they're just they're not positioned to be able to help quite yet. And they get a little too eager, but they want to do good things for the child. So when you bio parents see this step parent do something that you don't agree with, it's okay to say, hey, can we talk about why you grounded my kid for 2 weeks? You can have that conversation, but don't doubt their heart. They want good things for your child. They just think a 2-week grounding is the way to get there. Now that you can disagree on, but don't question their heart. Because the minute you start doubting their heart toward your child, like, I know why you grounded my kid, because you don't like my kid. And you think I'm been a bad parent all this time and you got to right all the wrongs. Now we have a whole new issue. Yeah. Now it's going to be really hard to find one voice. Now you've gone to attacking one another. And that leads to a different set of problems than just disagreeing about parenting. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense.
So don't get too judgmental too quickly. Try to trust their heart, but then have a conversation around the actual parenting decision.
Yeah. Well, we had a great conversation about the step family dynamic and really diving into it. But with this being the relationship podcast, we love to close with asking our guests, how do you define real love?
Real love. Well, I believe God is love. And when you look at how he loves us, it is two things. Well, it is steadfast, meaning it is never ending. It is ongoing, and it is deeply sacrificial. That's real love to me, and that's what I'm trying to emulate in my own life with my children, with my wife. And let me tell you, it's hard. Yeah. I haven't even gotten close. After 37 years of marriage, I am quite certain I am nowhere near the loving father, loving husband that my God is to me. But I'm inspired by that, and that's what I want to chase, and that's who I want to be.
That's awesome. Well, we hope all our listeners enjoy this episode as much as we did. And until next time, you guys, keep it real.
Yes, sir.